Now we're ready to build the two niche structures that go inside of the tower. One will go in the front and one will go in the back. So in the cutting guide, we're looking for the two pieces that are called niche frame front. And according to the notes here, once we cut them, we're going to look at our tower niche templates. And so I have those two pieces here in front of me. And then on page T3, template 3, we have our two tower niche frame templates. And these explain how to cut the openings in each of the frames. And in the interest of time, I've already done that. And let me just kind of talk you through a couple of things here. So the dimensions are given on the template. It's drawn approximately the 3/4 inch scale. Any of these little divisions that are in between the cutouts are 3/8 of an inch. That's indicated here with a blue dot, and it says all interior spacing equals 3/8 of an inch. Now, coming up from the bottom, you can see we start with 1 inch. Then these boxes are 1 inch high and 1 and 1, etc. Just use this to cut out your two template frames. We have a 1/2 inch border on each of the outside edges and another inch up at the top. So those are the two niche frame fronts cut out. Now the next step will be to cover them with pattern paper, but before we do that, we want to add some joining strips to them so that when we go to put them, insert them in the tower, those strips, the one part of them can be covered by our pattern paper that we add here. So I have cut what I'm calling skinny joining strips, and these you can either take your regular joining strips and cut them down, or what I've done here is I've cut some strips that are of cardstock that are 5/8 of an inch wide, and then I've scored them at 3/8 so that I have one side that's 3/8 inch wide and one side that's kind of skinny, it's only a 1/4 inch wide. And on that 1/4 inch I've just put some 1/8 inch score tape, and on the 3/8 inch side I have some 1/4 inch score tape. And these are going to get attached to the front edges of the frames, so with the 3/8 of an inch gets attached to the frame, and the 1/4 inch sticks up all around the perimeter, and that'll help us inset that into the tower. And when we put that on there, we'll line up those edges exactly, and we'll go all the way around the four sides of each of our tower frames. Then once we've accomplished that, we can measure and cut our pattern paper to size. I'm going to use this Charmed, I'm Sure paper, and it will be cut to the exact outside dimensions. You might have to, if you use the same dimensions as the frames, you might have to cut it in or trim off just a smidge so that it fits inside of the joining strips once they're on. But once you have that pattern paper, before you put it down, you'll put score tape around all of these openings, and then put the pattern paper down and then cut out the openings. But that's our steps. I think I'll get some score tape down and some pieces cut out and just kind of give you a look at what that looks like before we move on. So I've got both frames here, and this one is prepped to add the pattern paper. You can see that I have covered all of the frame in between the little hinges here with score tape, and I'll just pull off one vertical one to start with, get it lined up correctly, and then pull off the rest of it so that it'll fit in there very nicely. Now here on this one, I've completed that process, and I also have used some of my 1/8 inch black cardstock strips to frame some of the niches. Now the ones that we want to frame out are anything bigger than 1 by 1. The 1 by 1s will hold the little treat box drawers, and so the front of the drawers will come and finish off those. I did ink the inside of all the squares to make sure that I got rid of the white line from the pattern paper, and yeah, so this front frame is done, and I'll finish this process for the second frame. So as you can see, I've finished with putting the pattern paper and the trim on both of my tower niche frames, and I went around and burnished all of them, and as I did, I noticed I had left off a piece of trim on one of these, so that's a good check by burnishing all around. So now I'm ready to make all the little boxes that go behind the frame. And I think you can see I've got the little pieces and parts all laid out here. So we have two things to help us with this. Number one is in the cutting guide on page 2, it says to cut 10 to 11 strips of 1 by 12 with stiffness running the length. And then we've got some sub-cutting listed here. And that lists out all the pieces that you'll need to construct the little boxes here. I'm pretty sure I ended up with 11, but I'm not positive, so that's why I said 10 to 11 here. And so when I cut these according to the directions, and also here on the template for the niche frames, it says which size boxes go where. So here, for example, this is the 2 by 5 and 1/8. So to make this box, you'll need 2 pieces that are 2 inches long and 2 pieces that are 5 and 1/8 inches long. And one little tip for cutting these is it's hard to cut and keep all these little pieces square and straight. So what I did was I just took a piece of my chipboard, and this is a different size, but we'll just use it as an example. And if this won't, obviously the trimmer won't cut all the way through a piece of medium weight chipboard, but if you use it as a scoring, you can score through it and then finish cutting with your craft knife, and this way it'll keep all those cuts square, especially these little 1-inch ones. It's sometimes tricky to do that with just a ruler on your cutting mat. So now I know I've got all of these cut out of black chipboard, but actually I think for the niches, the ones, not the 1 by 1s, but the bigger ones that are going to have things in them, I'm thinking it would be better to have the edges covered with this cream colored cardstock, just because it's going to be a little dark inside of these places, and I think that will help show off the objects in them a little bit better. Now you'll have the benefit of my experience. If you see what I've done and you say, I think it would have looked better with black, then you could do all of the construction here with black cardstock. So I've got some strips of 1-inch cardstock cut for both, and this I've just put, these are cut 4.5 inches long, and I'll use them to put together the little squares. Let me just show you how I'm going to do this. Instead of using just a whole lot of tiny construction strips, I think this will be easier to do. And what I'm going to do is just butt joints in between and run them one next to each other. This is cut the same width as the little squares of chipboard, and we'll just put them down one after another. Kind of keep it straight, it might help to work towards yourself like this. Then we'll give that a good burnish. And then fold on each one of the joins. And then this last join, to make it, we'll just fold this one down. These are all rectangles, so you can just go and butt these two last joints up together and then give this a burnish and fold that last one. And so that's how to make the little 1-inch boxes. And we'll follow the same plan for making, so all the ones that are 1 by 1 use I'm using black cardstock and doing it this way. And for the ones that are not 1 by 1, for all of those I'm going to use cream cardstock and do the exact same thing. Now, one other thing that I've been thinking about is what I'm going to put in each of these niche frames. So the reason it kind of matters at this point is it's a lot if you're going to have anything hanging from one of the little cubbies, and it's easier to put a screw eye in there before you've got it all put together. So my plan, I've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little cubbies here. Just this one over here, I'm going to put something hanging in. And so before I finish putting the little box, so that's the 2 by 3 3/4, which is this set here. So in one of these twos, once I get the cream cardstock on, I'm going to drill a hole and put the with my awl and put a screw eye in, and I'll figure it out where I want to put it. This is what I'm going to put in there, a little bird cage, and I think if I put the screw eye about 3/4 of an inch from where the back of it is and centered, that will just be about right for where this will go. I'll test it out before I drill that hole with my awl. So I will do that before completing the 4-wall construction for that one. The rest don't have anything hanging, so we can just put them together just like we put this one together. So I'll be back when I've got that accomplished. So I have all of my little boxes constructed, both all little 1 by 1s, and then my niches that were constructed with cream colored cardstock. So now it's time to attach them to the back of the frame. And the way I'm going to do this is to take a box and get it squared up on my cutting board, run a bead of glue around the top, and then set the frame down on top. So, for instance, here's this first one here. I'll just stick another one down here underneath the corner to help balance things out here. Kind of check to see that I have things aligned, and then put a little pressure on there until, for just a few seconds, I'm using some quick drying glue. Then I'll proceed my way around here. And I think you can see here that this box, I attached my little bird cage up here at the top. I just put a screw eye in, and I put a couple of extra layers of chipboard. It may be difficult to see that up there at the top here, just to give that screw eye something extra to bite into. And then I've also on the back here figured out how much chipboard I would need so that I could put some score tape on there, so that when it finally gets settled into the back of the frame, I'll be able to attach it there as well. So that'll give it some extra support. So I'll just attach all of these frames around here, and then repeat that for the second one. So you can see that I've got all my little boxes added to my niche frames now. And in fact, I've started planning out what's going to go inside each one of the little niches or cubbies. And the next step is to cut the back. So you can see I have one in place here. That's what that black is. And on page 3 of the cutting guide, you'll notice that the backs are getting cut out of lightweight chipboard. And here I've got another one of them, and I just cut it to size, and then I painted it black. It's important that it's out of the lighter weight chipboard, because I found that with the real estate at a premium inside of the towers, if I used the medium weight chipboard, there just wasn't quite enough room to put these frames back in the 1/4 inch that we want to have. So I used lightweight, and then I just painted one side black. You can paint the other side, but it doesn't show, so it doesn't matter. So I painted one side black, and then when these backs go on, let me just move this one out of my way. When these backs go on, their edges meet up with the outside edges of all of the little boxes that we added. So I'm just going to temporarily put this one on with some blue tape. And I've got all those edges lined up. And now I want to have some colorful paper behind each one of these boxes. So I'm just going to take my pencil and trace out along the backs of just the large niches, the 3 large niches. And then I can remove this backing. And then when we want to measure to see how big these pieces of paper need to be. Now you may not be able to see my pencil marks. I can see them now. So we want the edges of the paper to be 1/8 of an inch past the line here. So for example, this one down here, the line is coming up to the 2-inch marks. So I'm going to make it 2 1/8 wide, and then I'll measure 1/8 inch taller. So that's going to be 1 1/4 tall. Same thing, any of these that go to the edge is obviously going to go to the edge of the paper. So this one is again 2 1/4 wide by, and then here we'll measure 1/8 inch on either side of the line. So that's going to be 2 5/8 inch tall, etc. Measure that last one. So I'm going to get my pattern paper, and then I'll be back. So I have my pieces of pattern paper cut here, and I've also put abundant score tape on the backs of each one, and that's important for 2 reasons. Number one, when we go to attach this to the back, we'll glue all the little boxes to it, so we want to make sure that the paper is well adhered to the back so that gluing stays well. And then also, if we're hanging anything from or attaching anything to the backs of the panels, that's another reason for having the paper well adhered. So it's important to remember that when we drew these lines, they were the exact size of our openings, so that when we put our paper on, our paper should be bypassing those lines by about 1/8 of an inch on all sides, and of course coming right up to the edge if it's meets an outside edge. But these lines should not be used for aligning your paper. The paper should go past them, so keep that in mind. So I'm going to attach all of my papers and then I'll be back. So I have all my paper adhered there, and before I attach the back here, there's one thing I've been looking at, and that is this long interior line of this tall niche here. And on mine it wants to bow a little bit, so I'm just going to take a strip of leftover chipboard here and kind of wedge it and glue it in between this series of boxes and this edge here, just to kind of help keep that straight. Now that's just an optional step. If yours isn't bowing or if that doesn't bother you, then you don't need to do that. So I'll cut that off and just glue that in there. So when we put the back onto the frame here, we're going to glue around all of our individual boxes, of course. But then to add some extra stability, I've just cut some of my joining strips and I've folded them so that the score tape is facing to the inside. And I'll just do that on all of these. And I've cut them to the length of this back. And so what the deal is, when this goes on, we'll use these strips to add some reinforcement and to also hold that on each of the 4 edges. And I just find that it's easier to go ahead and prep those first so that when you're ready to put it on, you can put it down and then also engage these strips after you've got it down. So I'm going to add my strips. And go ahead and glue everything here, and I should say make sure you check that you've got this oriented properly, and especially for any of these light colored backgrounds, you'll want to check and make sure you don't have any kind of fuzzies, black fuzzies hanging out there, so that they would not look very nice if they're inside. So I'll get that done and then we'll be back. So I have the back attached, and I'm just going to put some good pressure on all of these joints here for a few minutes, and then I'll set this aside to dry thoroughly while I complete the second tower niche.